ATT Tech. We are an African recruitment company. We are actually the one of the only and one of the few talent first recruitment agencies, where we take a little bit of our profits and our fees and we reinvest them into our talent, ensuring that they get the skills that they need to become globally competitive. So that's me.
Thank you so much, Kate, for the introduction. I think the next person should be Ayushi. Sorry, Ayushi. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I am in the midst of a very hot summer in India right now. And I'm a product designer. I have been working in the field of AI for around 5 years now. Currently working in an organization that focuses on social impact driven through AI technology, which is called Vadhwani Institute for Artificial Intelligence. And I lead the design team over there. Yeah.
Thank you, Ayushi. I think we can go to Sakshi now.
Hi everyone, my name is Sakshi. I'm also another UX designer. I work at Microsoft on the conversational AI side there. I'm based in Seattle, but I'm visiting my hometown of Delhi right now, so I'm also similarly in the middle of a very hot day, and the AC is blasting here, but I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for inviting us, and look forward to finding out what you have in store for us.
Thank you so much for joining. And so, with our Ladies Month for US Ghana, we've organized this together with Ebia, and yeah, we are 2 females in US Ghana. So I would like Ebia to also introduce herself. She actually hosted the first webinar. So Ebia, can you please, do us the honor of telling us who you are?
Hi, everybody. So my name is Ebia, and I'm also a UX designer with WeWire Africa. And yeah, I'm also a community lead at UX Ghana, together with Nura, Michael, and Eric, who will be joining us very soon. But we're happy to have all of you here, and I believe that these discussions will go a long way to impact all the audience and everyone in here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ebia. And so before we continue, in as much as we are in our Ladies Month, we have some men who have joined us today. And one of them is my boss. Hello, Samuel.
Hi, Nora, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm good. Can you please introduce yourself to our wonderful ladies and gentlemen? Yeah.
Okay. I wasn't expecting this, but anyway, my name is Samuel. I'm a product designer. I'm based in Ghana at the moment, and I have a collective called the Design Junkies. So it's essentially a group of some great product designers in Ghana. Nura is a part of it. Michael is also a part of it. And there's 2 other people, Jeffrey and Reagan. So yeah, that's essentially it about me.
Okay, thank you very much, Samuel. Okay, so I think we can kickstart now. So with the list of the topics we have, I'm going to dedicate each topic of discussion to each speaker so that we can, be time conscious. I hope you all get it. Yeah. So our first question is, what do you consider to be the most promising emerging technology and why? And I think, Kate, I'll start with you on this one.
And I knew it, and I thought to myself, I should actually just have a disclaimer at the beginning that, the AI ladies who are much smarter should actually take up this section of the questions, because I was like, oh well, I'll just come in and chip in when I need to. But I'm sure you are. But with the little bit that I know about emerging technology, I really think in Africa, one of the most, it's not really emerging, but as adoption, as we take on more adoption of it, it'll become a little bit more emerging. And I think it's blockchain. And I think blockchain in elections. I think that will be very interesting in Africa. So I think that for me is the most promising emerging technology, because then we might actually have free and fair elections. What do you think, Nura?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, how do I say? They ring the votes too much. Yeah. So
Yes, there's a lot of creativity in our voting. So maybe blockchain will help lessen how creative the results are.
yeah. And I think we need an AI sort of perspective in this as well. So I think Sakshi, can you do us justice to this?
I mean, I'm biased. I mentioned I work on the conversational AI side, so most of my day is taken up by GPT and not much else. So it could also just be recency, like a recency effect. But I do think there's a lot to it. But at the same time, I think it's still important to be cautious of understanding how emerging technologies are coming up and being critical of these newer spaces as we're navigating them. But yeah, I think that would be my answer.
Ayushi, so what do you consider to be the most promising emerging technology and why?
I think Sakshi and I are sort of going to be in this space of just dwelling a lot on the AI space. But I do think that I mean, now being in this space for 5 years and seeing how rapidly, very recently it's transformed, I'm almost sort of like shocked a little bit, right? So I think that there's a lot that can be done. And to your point on blockchain, hopefully creating a fair system of voting, AI could probably detect, if there is anything going wrong over there. So I think, anyway, but like AI, I think, has a lot that it's already doing. And I think more recently, I've been working in the healthcare space for AI. And I think it's so interesting to see that maybe down the line, how much it can sort of do for countries like India, where healthcare is sort of inaccessible. So I'm sort of really interested and optimistic to use that technology in that space.
That's nice. Thank you very much. So looking at the fact that each day there are technologies, AI technologies coming up, and our design space is changing or improving, I should say, gradually. So how do you envision the emerging technologies transforming the design industry in the next decade? Yeah.
We missed you, Nura. Sorry. Did you?
Oh, okay. So as I was saying, I said that looking at the fact that, we have emerging AI technologies every now and then, and it's sort of, improving the design field. So how do you envision emerging technologies transforming the design industries in the next decade?
All right. Should I be going first? Okay. Okay. So, so designers are a really broad spectrum, right? And I think you have graphic designers, you have architects, you have like digital designers, you have more like fine art artists who also consider themselves designers. So I think at least in the digital space, it's going to be a lot about how do you collaborate with these technologies. I don't think it's going to entirely take over one or the other, but I certainly think that the quicker designers start to sort of think of themselves as partners with these technologies, I think the better it's going to be. And honestly, I think design also as a space has sort of been innovating a lot for the past 10 years, especially the digital space, right? So innovation in this space has not been sort of unheard of. So I think having said that, as a designer personally back in the day, I remember when I was in Photoshop using the pen tool and cropping each and every piece out, very time consuming, right? And now all of us just create a little bounding box and you sort of have your image cropped. And I don't think any of us look at that as hey, I'm a little scared of that. Yes, we can be skeptical of a lot of the other. I mean, I'm giving a very simple example, but it's one example of how we've seamlessly already integrated AI into our sort of, I guess, our designs every single day. And I was listening to this illustrator speak about how they looked at AI, and because with DALL-E and everything emerging now, there's a lot of scare that's sort of emerging with that, right? Of course, there are privacy concerns and everything, but she spoke about this one example where she said that, hey, imagine if someone commissioned me to create an artwork of a couple dancing in the middle of a very busy street. And let's say I focused on the couple who was dancing on the street, and I spent all my time illustrating them, and I sort of uploaded that and asked AI to say, hey, mimic my style and just create a busy street with the crowd, right? So that's a really good example of saying that you're not losing your craft, you're still providing your style, and the mundane work that you might not be so interested in doing can be done by AI, or you could create color variations with AI. So I think I think the future is going to be collaboration, and that's really all we have to sort of start coming to terms with. Yeah.
Thank you, Aishi. I think we all had, learned something from what you said. Yeah, so let's go to our third question. What are the potential ethical and social implications of adopting emerging technologies, and how can we address them? Okay, Kate, would you like to tell us something?
But as a function of what I do on a day-to-day basis with working with talent and professionals, I think where it can get a little bit unethical is perhaps in the digital skills gap, right? And I know that is not necessarily the structure of the question, but from my perspective, not necessarily being a designer, but as someone who connects designers to companies, I see that there are oftentimes more than not a very real skills shortage, especially when we're trying to see who is globally competitive. Now, because of remote working, your competition is not the girl down the road. It's the girl in India and the girl in the United States and the girl in South America. So when I think about the social implications rather than the unethical, the social implications of emerging technologies is then adoption, and then bridging that digital gap and the educational gap and the skills gap, because if we are not moving in sync with the speed of technology as best as we can, our skills are going to lag and adoption is going to lag, and eventually either we won't be globally competitive, or the technology will outrun us and we won't be able to do anything in any case. So for me, those are a few of the social implications that we need to look out for when we're speaking about emerging technologies and AI.
Thank you so much, Kate. I think we have to move to Sakshi now. So yeah, with our next question, what are the biggest obstacles or challenges that emerging technologies face in terms of widespread adoption? Yeah.
I think the biggest thing is something Ayushi was just discussing, just a lot of fear surrounding these technologies, because there's this sentiment that this is just going to take people's jobs, but I don't think it's going to happen, because if you don't learn how to operate in lockstep with these newer emerging technologies, you're just not going to be able to do your job as efficiently. And as designers, I think we have to recognize that it's just a consequence of being in tech, and things will continue changing. Like today, we have something going on the conversational AI side. Tomorrow, it's going to be something else. And if you don't learn how to adapt, you just won't be able to continue flourishing and innovating as a designer. But it makes sense. It makes sense that the average the average person looking at something like ChatGPT, for example, could get scared and think that it's gonna come, think that they're gonna come for their jobs. But I can see that being a big issue, just for like people like not in tech.
Thank you so much, Sakshi. I think we've all heard this myth, or this thing going on that AI is coming to take people's jobs, etc. Especially those who work as secretaries and how do I say, clerks and all those, those fields that I would say you would not need in-depth skills, to execute. So those people tend to fear that their jobs will be taken away from them because of AI. And frankly speaking, we all have seen where AI is going and how it is improving day after day. Like, for me as a designer, it sometimes scares me, how like AI can do basically or almost everything a human being can do. And the things that I imagine day in, day out are so scary. But in as much as they are scary and all those things, as designers, we have to take the opportunity to, use them to make our works easier and faster as well. Yeah. So we are going to our next question. How can designers, businesses, and organizations effectively prepare for and embrace the opportunities presented by emerging technologies? Ayushi, yeah.
I think this is tough, but I think it's sort of going to be a combination of what we've spoken about, which is it's constantly staying in touch, not fearing, and just not sort of being distant from these emerging technologies, being very, very connected and sort of thinking a step ahead, which means that organizations need to help inform their employees about the new tech coming up, sort of help invest in upskilling them, invest in sort of also strategizing for themselves. I think that what would their future look like, and then sort of making sure that their workforce is sort of ready for that, which means that maybe their jobs transform a little bit. So instead of if I did only X, if I have to now do X1, it's sort of like a different form of what I did. How can organizations sort of help better prepare? And I think this is going to be at an organizational level and at a country or a government level as well, sort of need to zoom out, and you need to start upskilling your workforce in a certain sense. So I think Kate spoke about this. She said that it cannot be that, a certain part of society or certain groups of organizations that are really heavily invested in this are the only ones being able to sort of, make sure that they're future-proof. It needs to be more strategic, strategically thought, I think. And I think governments are a nice space for that to happen, because they can set out policies which sort of enforce organizations to be better prepared. Because I think there's just so much going on that at an individual capacity, it's hard to sort of understand where you fit into this entire little puzzle that's being built for you. But I would say for me currently, as a personal journey, it's been a lot of upskilling, a lot of reading, a lot of staying in touch, and a lot of just welcoming this technology and adopting it, because it's not the first time we're going through a revolution, and in some sense, this is a revolution.
Yeah, Kate, I would also like you to say something, from your point of view regarding this topic.
Well, I think the way that businesses and organizations can effectively prepare themselves to take the opportunities that emerging markets bring about is to, as much as possible, collaborate and speak to, especially from an organizational perspective, who are trying to solve a problem using AI. right, is to speak to industry experts, to speak to people who have conquered in this area and have done well for themselves and have actually solved real problems using the technology, right? So I do not believe that technology needs to be something to be feared, as the ladies have been speaking about. It's not something to be feared because AI in itself, Nura, to your point, when you look at the capabilities of it, it does come off very scary and very, you almost, wonder if you won't be replaced in the next 2 years at the speed at which things are going. But if you view technology as an aid to your already, as an aid to your work, as an aid to your brilliance, as an aid to your creativity, and as an aid to your job, the way you use it becomes quite different. So that is what I would, encourage people to do, and to as they embrace these opportunities that come about, that as the technology is moving, ensure that you are reading, you are staying up to date with the capabilities of that technology, and also leverage that technology to make sure that the human things that the technology cannot do, you are refining. Like the strategy, the language, the taking things on an individual basis, and the things that make everybody uniquely human. Focus on expanding those skills, because AI is not there yet, and then use the AI as a tool to enhance your other skills. Is what I would say.
Okay, thank you so much, Kate. So with our next question, I'm still on you, Kate, because you're sort of, in your field. So in what ways can emerging technologies impact job markets, and how can we ensure a smooth transition for displaced workers? Yeah.
Right. This is a loaded question. And thank you for that. So when I was preparing for this talk, and I was looking at everything and reading and making sure that I'm well versed, in what the topic was for the day, I realized that when technologies emerge, and with previous revolutions that we've had, right now we're in 4IR, with previous revolutions that we've had, we found that the people who got displaced are the people who were not prepared and who were not able to use the technology at hand, right? So in order to avoid a situation where you are displaced, by emerging technology in whatever way or form, it's to ensure that while you still have the time, and while the technology is getting better and at a rapid rate, is to ensure that you are reading sources, especially on AI and emerging technologies, as a designer, right? There are things like Gartner always has reports. There's the MIT Technology Review that you can read. There's TechCrunch. There's the World Economic Forum blog that you can read. There's CB Insights. There's Futurism. There's VentureBeat. So there are so many options and so many resources that you can read and ensure that you understand where the technology is going and how you can leverage it in your job. And then also focus on things, like I said, that make you uniquely human. So the skills that make you uniquely human, like analytical judgment, flexibility, intellectual curiosity, bias detection, strategy, planning, all of those things that make you uniquely human. You need to hone those skills so that the technology can help you in your current position, right? So it's ensuring that you are constantly reading, you are constantly up to date with current trends and how this technology is being leveraged, and you are also making sure that the human things that you can do, you do them very, very well. Now, if you have been displaced by emerging technology and AI, the best place to go is back to school. Right, is find a course a paid course better, a paid course in technology is generally better, is to find a course where, you can learn about these emerging technologies. You can learn and try and leverage and see the gaps, because a lot of these reviews, like OpenAI blog, right, a lot of them, they give a lot of insights on what is coming in the next year or two, or what is coming in the next 5 or 6 months. Then you can begin to position yourself to ensure that you are employable again, right? Because it's not about what AI does is it disrupts the status quo. So you can't go to work anymore and do bare minimum. You can't just be a designer, for the sake of the word. You need to be a designer that is a strategic thinker, that understands business, that understands KPIs, that understands strategy, that understands marketing, that understands analytics. So the more well-rounded you are as a professional, as a designer, the less likely you are to be replaced. Right? Do they call it like a UX unicorn? So as close you are, as close as possible, become a UX unicorn so that it is difficult to replace you, even if technology advances to that stage. Is what I would say.
Sure, thank you so much, Kate. So we'll be going on a 2 minutes break, but before that, I would like to go to Sakshi to answer our next question. Which is, okay. Sorry, 1 minute.
Nira, just while you wait, so I've actually got a list of all the publications that I read on AI and emerging technologies. I'm just going to paste them in the chat for anybody who would need the information.
Sure. So yeah, with Sakshi, are there any concerns or risks associated with the rapid pace of technological advancement, and how can we mitigate them?
Absolutely. There's so much we need to think about when it comes to responsible AI and how to deploy technology like that to our users. So, for example, this feature I was working on for the better part of the last few months, it was the first GPT integration for our product. And the product I work on, it allows people to build bots. So you don't need to know how to code. All you do is go in to this website called Power Virtual Agents. You create a bot and you can use it anywhere you want. And the first GPT integration dealt with the idea that you and I could go put in xbox.com, for example, and it points GPT to that website and the bot becomes instantly useful. So it takes away most of like the manually authoring work that you'd have to do, the manual authoring work you'd have to do, but it also makes it really tricky for us as designers, like working on the other side of it. How do we minimize liability for not just our bot authors, so the companies who would be using a product like this, but also the end user. So someone who's going to be interacting with this bot in their everyday lives. They're just on xbox.com and they're trying to figure out what kind of console they need to buy. And what if GPT says something offensive or biased, or it hallucinates and gives inaccurate responses? How can we mitigate that? So we spent the better portion of this feature thinking through how to notify users that something may be AI generated. Where do we put disclaimers on how AI generated content can have mistakes? It almost became a joke in my team because we would say that disclaimer so many times a day. We're like, oh, we could get this tattooed. Like, we memorized it so much. And then I also worked on this feedback mechanism where you can where we try and elicit feedback from our bot authors and see if this content even makes sense before they publish it out for like the universe to use. The universe is a very grand term. It would probably be like a couple of people, but but it's really interesting. So we had to sit through a number of responsible AI reviews, spent a lot of time talking to lawyers. So we're making sure we're not putting the wrong content or wrong designs out there. But it was very humbling to realize how quickly we can mess up in this space and how careful we need to be. And this, I want to be cognizant of the fact that we had more resources when it came to working on this feature. So if you're on a smaller team, once again, I want to reiterate what Kate was saying and what Ayushi's saying. A lot of it just comes down to reading. Even like some of the designs like that I was coming up with, a lot of it was just coming from places like that like things I'd interacted with on Twitter. Like, okay, what are other companies doing? How is generative AI being explored by startups or like different teams? And how can we make sure we're doing the right thing? So one of my favorite things is reading how the New York Times bashes OpenAI. It's so interesting because it's the best way of understanding what kind of criticism lies like for like someone who's looking into this, as opposed to like us like trying to put something out there. Because it's really easy to take that techno-optimist perspective on things, because it's a balance. Like on one hand, you want to be open to things, but on the other hand, you want to make sure you're doing the right thing. So yeah, keeping an open mind, being cognizant of criticism, and making sure you're not making yourself too liable either. And it's a balance. But yeah, there's a lot to do. So making sure like you're not designing black boxy AI experiences. I know black boxy isn't a word, but I think it might as well become one at this point. So giving users the right controls and the right information at every step of the user journey is crucial.
Thank you so much, Sakshi. That was insightful. And so our DJ for the 2 minutes break has a technical issue. So we'll continue with the session. So meanwhile, our listeners and viewers can, drop their questions in the chat box for our speakers, right? So I think, we can continue with the session. Yeah, so what emerging technologies do you believe would have the most significant impact on everyday life in the next 5 years? Oh, are you sure you have your hand up?
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, I had no worries. I had my hand raised just to sort of just add to what Sakshi was saying, and I think Microsoft being a much larger team than the organization I come from, where we're just about 100 people, right, working across multiple solutions. I can sort of speak to the flip side of like us working on AI technologies, and we're not there yet, I would say. We were impacting, like, we're suddenly releasing something and millions of users are coming on and using that. But we're dealing with non-digitally literate, I would say, audiences of our society. So what Sakshi said, right, about disclaimers, about letting people know, what we interestingly learned was that those disclaimers sort of go unnoticed by this section of society, because they're still busy kind of understanding how to interact with it. And when you suddenly tell them something like, hey, this might be wrong, they're even wondering why they're here at all. So I think it's a lot of understanding who you're designing for and really connecting with your audience. So one of the things we like to do every day in our team, or at least on a weekly basis, is at least for every solution, someone's down in the field, actually interacting with at least one representative user, coming back, saying a story of how they interact with it. For example, our users are farmers or frontline healthcare workers, right? Now, they've probably been using a mobile phone just to call or just to send a WhatsApp message or use the WhatsApp voice feature. Downloading an app, using AI is just out of their, mind space. AI just seamlessly integrates into their work life just because we are forcing it down, right? Because we think it's going to be useful. But they are not looking at it from a critical aspect. Many of us are looking at AI products from like, hey, does this work for me? Does this not? Is it doing the right thing? Some people come into it with this sort of inherent trust in the product. And I think one of the things you need to do to build products ethically for this section of society is really, really stay connected with them. All the user-centered design mantras that we talk about really come into effect in this space. I just wanted to add that.
Sure. Thank you so much, Aishi. Thank you. We would have missed that. Oh, God. Okay, so on our next topic, what emerging technologies do you believe will have the most significant impact on everyday life in the next 5 years? Sakshi, yeah.
I don't know. how to answer this question. I'm not going to lie. Like I hesitate because I feel like we're in the middle of we're in the eye of the storm of this very trendy time in this at least Ayushi and I have been talking about conversational AI suddenly becoming dinner table conversation. I remember when I used to work with this team 2 years ago, people would yawn when I mentioned the word bots. They'd be like, "Oh, okay, I guess you're working on something related to chatbots." So I have some hesitation when it comes to this question in particular because it changes so fast. But once again, I think keeping an open mind, trying to learn as much as possible about everything that's happening across tech would be the most useful thing. And I am happy to open this up to other folks if you have stronger opinions on this than I do. But I feel like I've just been getting overwhelmed by how big it's become recently.
Definitely, because as I said earlier, day in day out there are emerging AI technology, so you wouldn't want to rely on just one because that one comes, so you are not really clear or specific on which one you would actually put your mind onto. And most of you are usually just thoughts on this.
I'm sort of in the same boat as Sakshi though. And I think just being, I can speak from what it looks like for us, right, day to day. And I think for us day to day, just because of our jobs, being designers, being who we are, and working the space that we're in, I know it's going to be AI that is going to largely transform it for me. I can't speak largely for the world because I think it's going to be a combination of all these technologies working together. There's going to be AI, and then it's going to be supported by blockchain, and it's going to be this, and then 5G is going to help propel all of that, into people. So it's going to be, I don't think one technology is sort of going to just take off and be the only thing, but at different parts, there's going to be a lot of innovation happening with different technology, and that's going to become the buzzword, right? Today it's AI, tomorrow it might become 5G. It was 5G a while ago. So I think it's just going to be all of it put together.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. So how can we strike a balance between innovation and responsible use of emerging technologies to avoid unintended consequences? Kate,
So I was going to answer the previous question.
Sure, you can.
This. As Anyushi said, it's for me when I thought about this question, I thought the most important, because that is how the question was phrased, right? The most significant impact on everyday life. Here on the African continent. I've never been to India, so I would love to go, but I don't know how things work there. But here, for me, the most significant would have been 5G, because without that foundation, right? What is AI if you cannot connect to it, right? If you don't even have access, and that's the thing with AI is that it needs the infrastructure to work. And I know that the AU and some of the governments in Africa have made tremendous strides in getting our infrastructure ready and improving and up there. But for me, the most significant emerging tech, I don't even know if 5G could even be considered an emerging tech anymore. But where there is countrywide 5G instead of little pockets of first world cities in Africa, right? Because in where I am, I can obviously access 5G, but where my grandmother's from, there's no way. They barely have 3G. So it's just the wide adoption of that, so that when we do start speaking about AI and smart cities and autonomous vehicles and all of that, we've got the infrastructure and the foundation to actually facilitate this kind of technology. So that was my question, the previous question. And when you ask me how can we strike a balance between innovation and responsible use of emerging technologies to avoid unintended consequences, babe, that's hectic, eh? I think I'll leave the AI geniuses to answer that one because I have no idea.
It's understandable.
I mean, I think you need to constantly monitor AI or like any emerging technology, right? You can't just create something and put it out in the world and let it live without it being unchecked in some sense. So, because I think when there's constant innovation, I think everyone's sort of looking forward. I think very few companies put as much effort into looking a little backwards. Hey, what we've built, how is that working so far? And that's sort of where the unintended consequences sort of lie. When suddenly, because for example, AI learns with all the new information that comes into it, right? For ChatGPT, I'm sure every time I write a prompt to it, it's learning from me. And likewise, for me, when my farmers submit a picture of their farm, I'm learning from that. Or my AI is learning from that. But if I don't sort of see how the performance is working on that very, very easily, and actually it's far more easy for the bias to creep in than we all think it is. It just takes a few weeks of data coming in and suddenly your model is performing dramatically differently. So I think investing enough in evaluation as much as you're investing in creation is sort of going to be, how we can check this in some way.
Sure. It's actually...
Yeah, I fully agree. We also spent a good amount of time doing a lot of research and trying to connect with users and understanding what they want and need, and having that data inform a lot of our design decisions as much as possible. That was definitely one thing that, I felt like I was doing as a designer. On a more personal level, I think struggling with this fear of messing up and not getting things right can also be extremely debilitating. I went through that a few months ago where I just got scared like at the scale of what was happening and how quickly things were moving, and trying to do the right thing. Like, I know I mentioned that earlier too, but it's hard because you're putting down these foundations for new emerging technologies at the same time as they're developing and like being thrown out like for people to use. So trying not to get too jaded and using it as an opportunity to shape that future, I think that's where things get interesting, and you can bring in some of that like more positive outlook and innovation in.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, with technologies emerging and people jumping into them to sort of explore them and know how they can make good use of them to make their work efficient and also energy saving. What measures should be taken to ensure the security and privacy of individuals as emerging technologies become more prevalent? Yeah. Yes, actually, we'll go with you.
I have a boring big tech answer here. It's like we work on authentication, again, like making sure like the content's right, you're showing the right disclaimers. This is security and privacy. Yeah, making sure. So in our case, like we have two types of users, like I mentioned, like we have people who interact with the product itself and are building bots. And then there are like the end users who will just be using the bots. So making sure we're informing, so we call them C1s, of what they're looking at and what's going to be shown to the end users. So they understand that like some experiences might be slightly different and what they're opening themselves up to. So yeah, I like working really closely with people on the content side, on the legal side, making sure we're putting in the right disclosures, disclaimers. Monitoring a lot of that because it's an iterative process. Like you won't get it right immediately, but yeah, making sure you're like keeping an eye out for everything on that front.
Okay, Aisha, yeah. what measures should be taken to ensure that security and privacy of individuals as emerging technologies become prevalent?
So, yeah, I think in addition to what Sakshi said, because those definitely apply to us for the products that I've been working on as well. But another interesting thing where designers play a really huge role, especially user researchers, is developing these consent sort of forms, or like these. You think these privacy forms are just the legal side of things, but I think there's this word called informed consent. So yes, you can have this huge document that runs pages, and we all know what we do. We just say check because we want to use the product and move forward. There is this sort of new thought process that says that that's not what you want to do. As designers, we know how to connect with our audience. We know how to provide the right summary to them. So when they're giving the consent, it is informed. They know what they're saying yes to, right? And I think doing that and participating in that conversation with a multidisciplinary team, which means you work with your engineers to say, hey, what data am I saving? You work with your ML scientists saying, what data am I going to use? You work with your product managers to say that how long is this product going to continue to capture this data for? And then work with your legal team to frame it correctly. So as designers, I don't think anyone thinks of this as their job. And very often when people join our team and this is a task designers have to do, they are almost surprised that we are participating in this. But I think doing that is so important and critical. Yeah.
Much, Arishi. So out of our 12 questions, we've exhausted 9. Yeah. We have 3 more to go. No. Actually, we've exhausted 10. We have 2 more to go. And yeah, so to our 11th question, how can emerging technologies bridge the digital divide and ensure equal access to opportunities for everyone? Kate.
This is also a quite a loaded question. Because if we're not careful, we'll deal with this. There has to be a lot done right in a lot of spheres, whether it be by policymakers, governments, infrastructure. There's got to be a lot done right before we can to jaded, as Sakshi said. We've got to take it where we are and move forward, right? Because there are so many initiatives that need to go into bridging such a diverse topic. So, we've got to look at what are the kids being taught in school? What is the curriculum? Do we have the infrastructure to even use emerging technologies? And because I'm speaking in the African context, we've got to now go back to the grassroots, because there are some fundamental things that are missing before we even start to use emerging technologies to bridge the digital divide. There is already a digital divide, and we haven't even started trying to use AI and emerging technologies to bridge them, right? So obviously it would be education. It's a difficult question to answer without sounding incredibly negative, right? Because there's a lot of things that need to go into it. But since we are speaking in the context of UX designers who are currently professionals, bridging the digital divide as an individual would mean that as much as you are learning about AI and all of this emerging technology, you would have to take someone along with you, right? Each one has to help one right now as things stand, because, we cannot fix infrastructure right now. We cannot go back and try and fix what our kids are learning in school, and we cannot even change the curriculum of universities. So what we can do right now as a professional body is each one help one, right? So as we are learning, we are teaching through LinkedIn, through mentorship, taking courses, reading publications, ensuring that we are as educated as possible and as globally competitive as possible, so that we can teach and help the next generation of designers bridge that gap a little bit quicker and a little bit sooner, right? And because emerging technology and AI is moving so quickly, we literally have to be mentoring at the pace that technology is moving in, and ensuring that we are bridging that digital, divide. And I know that it is a buzzword, and I know that the AU and there's 2030 goals and G20 and everybody's on this boat, but there's not much on the macro issues that we can solve. But the micro issues that we can solve right now in bridging this digital divide is each one, teach one. That's literally the best that we can do right this moment. And then, as we are doing that, more people, the divide will close, the information divide at least will close, and more people will get exposed to the knowledge that we have, while we wait for policy and government and infrastructure to catch up. So yeah, it's a tough one, but if each one teaches one, we're a lot better than what we are right now.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kate. To our last question, how can interdisciplinary collaboration and knowledge sharing facilitate the development and adoption of emerging technologies? I'll start with you, Ayushi.
So I think this question sort of summarizes everything we've been talking about, right? That it is going to be knowledge sharing. It is going to be like sort of reading that is going to sort of help the development of these technologies in a more ethical manner. Because as soon as we are all sort of a little more knowledgeable about it, we sort of start, I guess in some sense, we sort of start participating in the conversation. And the more we participate, we will build ethical products that we will want to adopt in some sense. I think the biggest divide right now, at least, and I'm sort of speaking from the space of AI products that I'm working on, where I'm trying to reach out to like farmers in India, or I'm trying to reach out to healthcare workers, is this. What's preventing them from the adoption is the lack of trust, the lack of transparency in these systems. And it's not that I think we don't want to give transparency. I think it's difficult. Technology hasn't reached there yet, where we are able to sort of explain everything in some sense. So I think it's going to be constantly like working with your users, trying to help them understand what you're building and where you're at and why you have certain limitations, and being very, very, I would say, free in sharing that, not holding back and sort of wondering that, someone might not want to use a product because either you're giving too many like disclaimers, or either you're giving like, either you're saying things too negatively. But I think transparency is going to drive adoption. The more people feel participated in the emerging technology, the more they're going to want to welcome it with like open arms in some sense. And that only can happen with like people collaborating and each one teach one. I love that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Ayushi. Kate, you raised the hand.
I did. Because this question, I think, is almost as important and a summary of everything that we've been speaking about. But I think what is also important is, if emerging technology is going to be used worldwide, there needs to be interdisciplinary collaboration as well as intercontinental collaboration. Because what's currently happening is that technology is getting built in the States or wherever it's getting built, and then it's being like retrofitted into Africa. So we must just kind of figure out how it's supposed to work, and without consideration of our issues, our infrastructure, our culture, our way we interact with technology, because we don't have a voice in those rooms a lot of the time. There's a lot of retrofitting happening. So I think that the collaboration, yes, has to be interdisciplinary, and it also has to be intercontinental, so that we don't have a retrofitting situation on our hands.
Thank you so much.
I'd like to add that while it's intercontinental, it needs to be really hyper local. Like, one of the things that we love to do is saying that instead of building for the whole world, because the whole world is not one person, there's so many different bodies over there, you need to sort of build for each one, and it's okay to go slow. Just move slowly. Yeah.
I had a professor who used to say something like that. They would say, if you're building, they said this in class, if you're building for everyone, you're almost building for no one. So you also need to figure out who your users are and how you're catering to them. So I fully hear you on that.
Yeah, so Sakshi, do you have anything to say regarding our last? Yeah.
I wanted to add one more point. This was more about the previous question, but also ties into our general conversation here. I was thinking about Kate's response to the previous question, which was, how can we bridge the digital divide and ensure equal access to opportunities? I think I look at it from two perspectives. On one hand, this knowledge sharing is becoming so accessible that it's easier for people to learn things at a faster rate than before. It's easier for them to access that information. But another thing we need to keep in mind when we're thinking about accessibility is how we're building those experiences for people as well. If you're on the design side of things, how are you keeping in mind that transparency that we were just talking about, transparency, control, and how we're building trust in these experiences, that they would even be able to use something like this XYZ emerging technology and understand how much knowledge exists in the universe, and how can they use it to their benefit. Yep.
Sure. Thank you so much, ladies. We've exhausted all our questions, and I think we were time conscious as well. 1 hour exactly. Yeah. To our listeners and viewers, does anyone have any question for us? If you have a question, just drop it in the chat box. I think we'll use the next 2 minutes to answer questions. Any questions from anyone? Okay, yeah. Sam raised the hand. Sam, you can speak, please.
Yes. Before I ask my question, I'd like to say thank you for putting this together. I've learned so much from this talk. I really enjoy what I think it was Kate who mentioned that designers sort of need to also think outside the boundaries of just design, become more business minded and all that. And I like what he just touched on, the last bit of the retrofitting and localization of these AI technologies that we use, and which leads into my question of diversity in terms of the languages. And so this goes to maybe Sakshi, you can help out with this since you do conversational AI. So my question is, so given the diversity, the linguistic diversity that we have, right? So how can conversational AI be developed to understand and interact effectively with all the different languages that we have in the world? So for example, right, so if you go to India, I know India has over 20 official languages, if I'm not mistaken, right? And then in Africa, there are countless different dialects. I know South Africa has Zulu, Afrikaans, all these other great languages. In Ghana, there's Akan, Ebuechi, Ga, right? So, how can we sort of use conversational AI to sort of make sure that all these people who speak these underrepresented languages, they will be also able to utilize these AI technologies and not be left behind? Else we risk the gap being widened by those who are able to leverage these technologies, who are up there, and those who are down there who might not necessarily be able to speak these English or French or German or all these top global languages. I hope my question is clear.
No, I totally hear you on this. When I first started working on this team, I made such a huge stink about this too, because they gave me the product requirements, and they're like, "Oh, this is only in English." I'm like, "What do you mean it's only in English?" And they go, "It's trained just on English," and I was like, "Wait, how is that supposed to work? Like, we're supposed to be marketing this to the world, but we're not even training their data like using other languages, or like the model's not trained on other languages." So I hear you, I feel it, working on the other side as well. It can be disappointing, but once again, I've been trying to take like a more optimistic approach and take it as like a starting point, because I also know that they're starting to train a lot of models in different languages now. And looking at it as an iterative process has been helping me at least make peace with these gaps in the beginning. And I really hope we can start bridging them in the near future. And I know it's happening already. Like GPT-4 is out. It supports a number of more languages. I don't know the exact count, but I know it's not just English anymore. It also expanded from text to like images and video. So I know it's changing rapidly every day. So I'm also like on a human level trying not to take it too hard for myself. But as a designer, just, understanding that that's the process. That's also an engineering constraint that we're trying to make the best, like we're trying to make the most of, and starting somewhere is better than starting from like nowhere.
Okay.
And I hope that's not too toxically positive. I hope that's an okay response.
I think that's an okay response. I mean, as designers, we can only hope to think creatively, as you say, because we can't push the most ideal version of a product out at once. So I think that's a good way to do things. So yeah, thanks for that response.
Thank you, Sam, for interacting. Do we have any other person who wants to add something or ask a question? If you want to ask a question or, suggest something, just raise your hand. Okay. Mike, please, you can speak.
Okay, so I'd like to know what your biggest challenge has been working on such a technology that has the power to shape the future. So, as a designer, what has your biggest challenge been so far?
Who are you shipping the question to?
Oh, anyone can answer, since it's a general design question.
Aishi.
Yeah. I think what's been interesting for us, I think, creating products that actually have while ChatGPT and other open tools are sort of just sharing information, etc. I think if you move to more AI products that are sort of diagnostic in nature or have more hard-hitting sort of impact, I think as a designer, trying to gain trust from our users at least has been our biggest challenge. And I think, like Sakshi said, there's always a starting point, right? Where you're not as great, you're not always right. You might never always be right, but at least you're probably not right a lot more times than than the user hopes to be. And I think in those situations, sort of one trying to convey that message while still saying that the product has a huge potential positive impact if you start adopting it. That's been the toughest thing as a designer, to sort of design for and then constantly build off, because we've noticed that once trust is lost, it's so much harder, right? To a point where at one point I remember fearing that, hey, I work on several products, and I think when one of the products lost trust with a certain segment of users, I almost didn't want to go back with the next product unless it was closer to perfection. And I think as a designer, and if as a designer you interact with an ML person building this, you will always have that argument where you're like, hey, this is good enough, sensitivity, specificity, all the AI terms. And then as a designer, you'll be like, no, my users need more accuracy. And having that internal conflict and making sure you're not externalizing that conflict and still asking for that trust from a user, I think that's really hard. And asking trust in an ethical way. You're not asking for blind trust. You're asking for like trust in ways to say that, hey, we are giving you a product that sort of is going to tell you when it thinks it's doing something well or when it thinks it's not doing something well. But those are all really tricky situations. And there are many more in the AI space, I think, that where almost the tech can't even tell you when it's doing something wrong. So what do you do then? Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ayushi. I think we'll go for our last question or suggestion from anyone, any of our audience. Any suggestion or question for our speakers? Okay.
Yeah.
I think.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So one last one. So obviously AI is booming, and in the next couple of years, it's natural to expect that to be worldwide, fill up a lot of places. And so for people who might just be starting out designing, since AI is booming now, they want to get into the field of AI design. What would you, or how would you advise them to start, or what resources should they start with? Is it the same process as the standard way of getting into product design, or there's some differences? This goes to anyone.
I got into AI just because I was bored of I was bored of what I was already doing in some ways. And I said that, hey, this is something cool. 5 years ago, I said, this is interesting. Let me see. And as a designer, do I have something new to offer? Is there going to be an interesting new challenge for me? And frankly, I think I spend as much time as I have purely out of curiosity of what does the role of a designer in an AI product mean. And I think my perspective. Sorry. Yeah, okay, I think there's some disturbance, that's fine. I hope you all can hear me. But I think what I can sort of safely, conclude for myself right now after this journey, which is probably going to continue as well, is that it's really no different. You apply the same principles day to day. I thought it'd be really different, but it's really no. I think as long as you're user-centered, as long as you are sort of still asking the right questions, you have an investigative mindset, you have a problem-solving mindset, I think, and you're always sort of, going back for hypothesis testing, all of that stuff, I think that's the role we all have to sort of play. And as per how do you sort of design for AI, I think when you get into that space and you make sure that you're working with your team so closely that you understand the tech, the inner workings of a tech. It's like opening up a MacBook, right? And understanding what's happening inside, opening up a computer, opening up a gadget. As soon as you get to that, and it's not that hard. It sounds fancier than it is. It's really, really easy, I think. So I would I say this to all designers, do not think of this as a big, scary world. It's a very simple world, and all of us can sort of be a part of it.
Great, thank you.
Okay. So thank you so much to all our speakers and our audience for joining us today. I think this is the end of our webinar, our second webinar for our Ladies Month. I would like to send congratulations to all of us, for taking time to join here and speak as well as, learn together. Thank you all, and I hope you have a wonderful morning, evening, or afternoon, depending on your time location. Okay, goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.